The pen was already in my hand when she leaned across the desk and lowered her voice to just above a whisper. "Sir," she said, glancing toward the hallway where my son was waiting just outside the door. "I need you to look at page 4 before you sign anything." Something in the way she looked at me, not at the papers, not at her computer screen, but directly at me, made me set the pen down. I am 64 years old. I worked 38 years as a licensed electrician in the same county where I was born. I know what it looks like when someone is trying to protect you from something you don't yet see. My wife used to look at me that way sometimes, right before she told me something I wasn't going to want to hear. Calm, steady, but with something urgent underneath. The notary was a woman probably in her mid-50s, reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, a small silver cross on a chain around her neck. She had introduced herself professionally when we arrived. She had shaken my son's hand and then mine, and now she was looking at me the way my wife used to look at me. I turned to page 4. I had to read the paragraph twice before I understood what I was looking at. This was not an investment account authorization form. This was a durable power of attorney. Broad, comprehensive, with no expiration date, granting full financial control over every account, every asset, every decision involving money to my son. My hands didn't shake. I've always been steady with my hands. But I felt something move through my chest, slow and cold, the way cold water moves through old pipes. I looked up at her. She gave me the smallest nod. I set the papers down on the desk and said, very calmly, "I think I need to use the restroom before we go any further. Let me back up. Because none of this makes sense without the beginning." My wife and I bought our home in 1989 for $62,000. A 3-bedroom house on a corner lot with a big backyard and a garage that I converted into a proper workshop over the years. We raised 2 children in that house. My son, who is now 37. My daughter, who is 33 and lives in Colorado with her husband, and my 2 grandchildren. My wife was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in the spring of 2021. She fought it for 14 months. She passed in the summer of 2022 on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting right beside her holding her hand. We had been married 39 years. I stayed in the house for almost a year after she died. I didn't know what else to do. Her garden was still in the backyard. Her handwriting was still on the recipe cards in the kitchen drawer. I would sometimes walk into a room and expect to see her there. My son started calling more after she passed. He had always been the type to come around when things were going well and disappear when they weren't. But I told myself, grief changed people. Maybe losing his mother had softened something in him. He called every Sunday for a while. He brought his wife over for dinner. They asked about my health, about whether I was sleeping, about the house. The house came up a lot, actually. "Dad, this place is too big for one person. Dad, the market is incredible right now. You'd be crazy not to sell. Dad, you could downsize into something easier to maintain and have money left over. Real money." My daughter called me from Colorado and asked if I was okay, if I was eating. She didn't say much about the house. When I mentioned that my son had been bringing it up, she got quiet for a moment and then said, "Just don't do anything fast, Dad. You don't have to decide anything fast." I thought she was worried about me emotionally. I thought she didn't want me to make a hasty decision while I was still grieving. I understand now that she was worried about something else entirely. I listed the house in March of last year. It sold in 9 days for $490,000. After agent fees and closing costs, I walked away with $453,000. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes away. Clean, quiet, manageable. I kept my tools in storage. The day the sale closed, my son called me 4 times. He had never called me 4 times in a single day in his adult life. The proposal came 3 weeks after closing. My son took me to lunch at a restaurant he chose, a nicer place than we usually went. He ordered a bottle of wine without asking if I wanted any. His wife joined us halfway through the meal, which I hadn't known was planned. He had a folder with him. He slid it across the table with the casual confidence of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "Dad, I've been talking to some people," he said. "People who know what they're doing with money, and I want to help you protect what you have." He explained that he wanted to set up a managed investment account on my behalf. Something conservative, he said. Appropriate for my age. He used words like diversified and tax-advantaged and inflation-protected. His wife nodded along at the right moments. She had always been good at that. I asked questions. I asked who these people were. I asked what the fees looked like. I asked if I could see the actual account documents before signing anything. My son smiled and said, "Of course." He said he had already made an appointment with a notary for the following Thursday to handle the paperwork. He said it was all straightforward, just standard authorization forms. I said I'd be there. What I didn't say was that something about the lunch felt rehearsed in a way that made me uneasy. The wine I hadn't asked for. The folder that had clearly been prepared well in advance. The way his wife laughed a beat too quickly at everything I said, as if she was working to keep the mood light. I drove home and called my daughter. "He wants me to sign some investment paperwork," I told her. The silence on her end lasted a few seconds too long. "Dad," she said carefully, "before you sign anything, can you send me whatever documents he gives you?" I asked her why. She paused again. Then she said, "I just want to look at them. Please." I told her I would. I didn't know then how important that promise would turn out to be. Thursday came. My son picked me up from my apartment. He was cheerful in the car, talking about a fishing trip he was planning, asking about my neighbor, asking if I'd watched the game last weekend. Light conversation. Easy conversation. The notary's office was in a small professional building near the county courthouse. A waiting room with 2 chairs, a water cooler, a silk plant in the corner. My son knew exactly where to go, which told me he had been there before, possibly more than once. The notary brought us into a small office and set a stack of documents on the desk. She made brief small talk, offered water. My son declined for both of us before I could say anything. She began walking through the papers: investment account authorization, beneficiary designations, account access forms. I was reading carefully, the way I always read anything I'm asked to sign. My son was watching me the way you watch someone when you're hoping they won't read too carefully. Then she got to page 4, and she lowered her voice, and the room got very quiet inside my head. I excused myself to the restroom and closed the door behind me. I stood at the sink and looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. 64 years old, gray at the temples, crow's feet, the same face I'd been looking at my whole life, a little more worn, a little more tired. My wife used to say I had an honest face. She meant it as a compliment. I took out my phone and called my daughter. She picked up on the second ring. I told her what page 4 said. I kept my voice low and level. I told her word for word what the document described. I told her where I was. She didn't panic. She is her mother's daughter. She got quiet for a moment and then said, "Dad, do not sign anything. Tell them you need more time to review. Tell them whatever you need to tell them, but do not sign." I asked her if she knew something I didn't. She was quiet again. Then she said, "6 months ago, I tried to check on the joint savings account you and Mom had. The one you told me still had $40,000 in it. It was empty, Dad. I didn't know how to tell you." I gripped the edge of the sink. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Since October," she said. I hired someone to look into it quietly. I needed to be sure before I said anything. The room felt smaller. I breathed slowly. "All right," I said. "I'm going back in." I returned to the office and sat down. My son looked at me the way he used to look at me as a teenager when he was waiting to see if I'd caught him in something. A particular kind of stillness that pretended to be relaxed. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "I just want to make sure I understand everything before I sign." I picked up the papers and read through them slowly. Not because I needed to read them again. I needed time. I needed to look at him across that desk and understand what I was actually looking at. This was my son. I had taught him to ride a bike on the sidewalk in front of our house on a Saturday morning in October. I had sat in the bleachers at every single one of his Little League games, even the ones in the rain. I had paid for 2 years of college before he dropped out. I had lent him money twice without asking it back, because I was his father, and that's what fathers do. I had sat beside his mother while she died and held her hand and told her I would be all right. And he had spent the last year waiting for that moment so he could take what little I had left. I set the papers down. I'd like another day to review these with my own eyes, I said. I want to read everything tonight. My son's jaw tightened. Just slightly. But I had been watching that jaw my entire life. Dad, the appointment is today. This is just standard paperwork. I'd like another day, I said again. Quietly. Calmly. The way I say things when I mean them absolutely. The notary was looking at her desk. But she was listening. My son pushed back a little more. He said there were deadlines, that the account window would close, that this was time-sensitive. His voice stayed friendly on the surface, but underneath it was getting tight, pressured, something close to desperate. I stood up. I appreciate you setting this up, I said. I'll call you tomorrow. He drove me home in near silence. When I got out of the car, he said, Dad, I just want to help you. He said it like he meant it. I've thought about that a lot since, whether some part of him actually believed it. I closed the car door and walked inside. That night, I called my daughter back, and we talked for almost 2 hours. She had already spoken to an attorney she trusted, a woman who handled estate and financial fraud cases in Denver. The attorney had agreed to take a call the following morning. The three of us talked on the phone for 45 minutes. I told them everything I remembered about every financial conversation I'd had with my son in the past year. My daughter told the attorney about the empty savings account. The attorney asked careful, methodical questions. By the end of the call, she told me what I needed to do. I needed to go to my bank in person, that same day, and place an immediate protection hold on every account in my name. I needed to request a full transaction history going back 18 months. I needed to change every password and PIN associated with any financial account I held. And I needed to do all of this before my son realized something had shifted. I was at the bank when they opened the next morning. The bank manager, a man about my son's age, sat across from me while I explained the situation. He pulled up my accounts. He was quiet for a moment as he looked at the screen. Then he turned the monitor slightly so I could see. Over the past 14 months, there had been 11 separate withdrawals from the joint savings account my wife and I had held since 1997. Each one under $10,000. Each one made through a third-party transfer I had never authorized. The account, which had held $42,000 at the time of my wife's death, had been completely emptied by last August. I had never noticed because I had not been checking that account. I had been grieving. I had been trying to survive one day at a time. 11 transactions, 14 months, $42,000. My son had started before his mother was even in the ground. The attorney filed a formal complaint with the County Financial Crimes Unit on a Wednesday. 2 investigators came to my apartment on Friday morning. I gave them everything: the transaction records, the timeline, the power of attorney document I had photographed with my phone before leaving the notary's office. I also gave them something else. After I left the bank that first morning, I had driven back to the notary's office. I asked to speak with her privately for a few minutes. She came out to the waiting room, and I thanked her. I told her she had no way of knowing what she had done for me by speaking up, but that I wanted her to know it mattered more than I could say. She nodded quietly. She said she had seen similar documents brought in before. She said she always made a point of making sure the person signing understood exactly what they were authorizing. She said it was her job, but the way she said it told me it was more than her job. I asked if she would be willing to provide a statement to investigators if it came to that. She said yes, without hesitating. Her testimony, combined with the bank records, was what the investigators called a clean evidentiary chain. My son had not just stolen from me, he had attempted to obtain a legal instrument that would have given him control over every financial decision in my life, permanently. The investigators told me that if I had signed that document, my son could have liquidated every account I owned, and there would have been almost nothing I could have done about it. I thought about that for a long time after they left. My son was arrested on a Tuesday morning, 5 weeks after the notary's office. His wife had been interviewed by investigators the previous week. She had cooperated fully, which told me she had been frightened into it. She had known about the withdrawals. She had not known about the power of attorney. When she found out what the document actually said, she had told investigators everything. My son had gambling debts. That's the part I hadn't known. He had been accumulating them for almost 3 years, from a combination of online accounts and arrangements with people I would not have wanted in my home. By the time he came to me with the folder and the bottle of wine, he owed close to $210,000 to people who were not patient about being owed money. My daughter flew in from Colorado when the arrest happened. She sat with me in my apartment, and we had coffee and didn't talk for a while, which was all right. She had her mother's way of knowing when silence was more useful than words. "I should have told you sooner," she said eventually. "About the account. I was afraid of what it would do to you. You were protecting me," I said. "I was," she said. "But you didn't need protecting. You needed the truth." She was right. My wife would have said the same thing. There are things I've turned over in my mind since all of this happened. Not obsessively, but the way you turn a stone over to look at what's underneath. Not to make yourself feel worse, just to understand. I've thought about the Sunday calls after my wife died, whether any of them were genuine. Whether the part of my son that showed up at my door with a casserole and asked how I was sleeping was the same part that was already making transfers from our account. I've thought about the house. Whether the push to sell was always about positioning me for what came next, or whether it started as concern and became something else when he realized how much money was involved. I've thought about what I would have done if the notary had not stopped me, if I had signed page 4 without reading it. Within weeks, probably within days, my son would have had the legal authority to do anything he wanted with $453,000. I would have been 64 years old with no home, no savings, and no legal recourse. The apartment I was renting would have become something I could no longer afford. I would have been entirely dependent on the same person who had engineered it. I try not to stay in that version of events for long. What I return to instead is a woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses at the end of her nose, leaning across a desk and speaking very quietly so only I could hear. That's the version that matters. My son was charged with financial elder abuse, forgery, and unauthorized account access. His attorney negotiated a plea. He is serving a 30-month sentence at a minimum security facility 2 hours from here. His wife filed for divorce in December. She and her children, my grandchildren, are living with her parents for now. I have sent my grandchildren birthday cards. I don't know yet what the right thing is regarding their mother. She knew, and she stayed quiet for a long time. But she also has 2 children, and was living inside a situation I didn't fully understand from the outside. I'm not ready to make a permanent judgment about her. I have thought about my son almost every day, not with rage, which surprised me, more with something quieter and harder to name. Grief, maybe, though a different kind than the grief I know from losing my wife. This is the grief of realizing you didn't fully know someone you thought you knew completely. The grief of going back over decades of memories and not knowing which ones to trust. My daughter called me last month from Colorado. My grandchildren wanted to know if Grandpa could come visit for spring break. I told her I'd be on the first flight I could book. 3 months after the arrest, I went back to the notary's office. I brought 2 things with me: a handwritten letter on good stationery, the kind my wife kept in the desk drawer for occasions that deserved it, thanking the notary by name for what she had done, and a card from a local nursery, a gift certificate, because she had mentioned briefly when I visited that she was trying to grow tomatoes on her back porch and was having trouble with the soil. She wasn't in when I stopped by, so I left both things with the receptionist with a note asking that she receive them. She called me that afternoon. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know," I said. "I wanted to." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How are you doing?" Really, nobody had asked me quite that way in a while. Not the investigators, not the bank manager, not even my daughter, who loved me but sometimes treated the situation like a problem to be managed rather than a wound to be acknowledged. "I'm getting there," I told her. "Better than I was." "Good," she said. "I'm glad." That was the whole conversation, but I thought about it for a few days afterward. How sometimes the people who do the most for you are the ones who had no particular reason to. A woman at a desk doing her job, making one decision in one moment to tell an old man to look at page 4. 38 years I worked as an electrician. You learn to respect the systems that hold things together quietly, in the walls, out of sight. You learn to respect the small components that prevent larger failures. A single connection, done right, that keeps the whole thing from burning down. She was that for me. A connection done right. I still live in my 2-bedroom apartment. I have a financial advisor now, one I found myself, vetted myself, and met with 3 times before I trusted her with anything. I have a proper will that my daughter helped me review with an estate attorney. I have accounts that are mine alone, structured correctly, with the right protections in place. I go fishing on Saturdays when the weather allows. I have started cooking properly again, not just heating things up, but actually cooking. My wife's recipe cards are still in a box in my closet, and I have started going through them one at a time. Last Sunday, I made her pot roast from the card she wrote out in 1994. Her handwriting a little hurried the way it always was, and it came out right. Not exactly right, but close enough that I had to sit down at the kitchen table for a few minutes before I could eat it. Close enough. I am not a man who talks about himself much. I spent most of my life being the person other people leaned on rather than the one doing the leaning. My wife understood that about me, and loved me anyway. My daughter understands it too, but I wanted to say this plainly, in case it matters to someone who is listening. Money reveals things, not just about people's intentions, but about the distance between who they are and who you thought they were. I learned that the hard way, at an age when learning things the hard way costs more than it used to. The lesson was expensive, but I'm still here to have learned it. Be careful about who you let close when the numbers get large. Be careful about doors that open wide and fast when they were barely open before. Be careful about cheerfulness that has an agenda underneath it. And if you are ever sitting across a desk from someone who is asking you to sign something, and the person who brought you there is waiting right outside the door, take the time to read every single page, every word, every clause, because there are good people in the world. People who will lean across a desk and lower their voice on your behalf. People who will make one decision in one moment that changes everything. But you have to be paying attention to let them help you. I set the pen down in time. Not everyone does.